Morai v'Rabotai, let us begin. We are on Daf Chet Amud Aleph 8a1 if you're following in the art scroll. And in 8a1 in the Mishnah is where we will pick up from where we left off yesterday with all the murderous opportunities that we had in yesterday's. I just want to make sure that no one's getting any clever ideas. Just because it says you're patur from galut, guys should not go crazy, even if there's a guy you really don't like. Says the Mishnah, you know why? Because if you really don't like them, then the laws of galut don't apply. Says the Mishnah, Hazorek even the Reshut Harabim v'harag. Someone throws a stone into the Reshut Harabim. Normally, what does Reshut Harabim mean? Public thoroughfare. 600,000 people traveling and a certain amount of amot wide and all the characteristics of a public domain. We'll see if that's what it means here. Hazorek even l'shut harabim. You throw a stone into a public place. V'harag, and you killed. Hareze goleh. That's the Tanakama, the original statement of the Mishnah. Now comes Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov. Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov says, Im mikishi yatzah ha'even miyado, if from when the moment the stone left his hand, Hotzi halat rosho v'kibla, off in the window, in some across the street downstairs, someone is checking to see if it's raining outside. Sticks his head out the window. The stone, which had already been thrown before, hits him on the head. Which means that at the moment of the releasing of the stone, there was no head there. Guy was inside. So he's throwing the rock into what he thinks is a public domain, or we'll see what that means. He's throwing it into this public domain, and there's no one there. And there's no one there. So in that case, says Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov, Hareze patur. This guy now is patur, because in the moment that he threw it, there was no one there. Now,
less than galut.
Exactly. Now we'll see exactly what's going on over here in terms of it's a bit of a broader question. What's the broader question over here? If you look at the sequence of the Mishnah, it's not evident immediately if there are two different opinions here or one opinion with an explanation. Let's start the Mishnah again quickly. The Mishnah starts and says, you throw a stone, Reshut Harabim, galut. Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov Omer, if the circumstances were such that the victim was not present at the time of the launching of said missile, which I have learned over time, missile is just a term that's used to describe anything which is launched. So in the translation of the Pesukim, of on Avraham Avinu and of the Egyptians when they're throwing things at the Jewish people at the desert, in the desert right by the ocean, so it's always translated as missiles. And I could not understand why until I eventually uncovered that's the accurate terminology. Now, since that's the case, you might understand that Rabbi Eliezer is saying, in that case you don't get galut. But the Tanakama is saying, I stand by my general, all-inclusive rule. Throw it to Reshut Harabim, galut. So it's not clear from the Mishnah if the Tanakama and Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov argue on the appearing head moment, idea, or if the Tanakama holds even in the appearing head moment, you would still be hayav galut. Let's continue. The Mishnah continues, Zarak et ha'even lechatzero veharag. You throw a stone into your own backyard. You launch a stone in your own backyard, and you killed somebody.
Did you have the example last week, though, that the person had to have permission to...
We're going to hit that right now. Literally the next words. If the nizak, the one who got damaged, was allowed to go into the backyard. In other words, I have a next door neighbor, his kids, his wife, his family, they always come over, they're always walking around, coming from their yard into my yard. We have barbecues together. I had ribs with that guy. Anyone remember that one? Okay. If that happens, the guy's expecting the nizak to come into his backyard. In such a case, goleh, you get galut. Because the guy has permission to be in your yard. Shene'emar, like it says, ve'asher ya'avo et re'ehu bayar, the classic case of killing accidentally that we described with regards to the barzel, the iron and the wood, whether it's from the tree or from the stick itself, how we explained it. In both cases, it was ya'ar, where they went together into a forest. What, just like a ya'ar, just like ma'ayar, just like a forest, rishut lenizak v'lamazik likanesham, there's permission for the nizak, the one who is a victim, and for the aggressor, the mazik, to go there. Afkol, by delineating the name of the place that it happened, the Torah must be explaining to me that this is the parameters for where the law can be applied. Otherwise, there's no purpose in telling me that it's in a forest. Just tell me the story about the axe and the wood, and then wherever it happens, it happens. It must be that the forest is a mi'ut. A mi'ut means an exception, and it's coming to exclude cases that were not forest-like. What is the case of a forest? A place that a reshuta, a nizak, and a mazik have the ability, the permission to be there. Yatzah chatzer balabayit, we exclude from here the chatzer, the backyard of the balabayit, of the aggressor, of the murderer. She'en reshut lenizak likanes lesham. That there's no permission for the nizak, for the one who is the nizak, the one that's the victim, to go into that place. Now, it's actually quite interesting. You see the parentheses there? Vila mazik? Yeah? So normally those parentheses mean that you don't read it. And part of the reason why some people exclude that from the Gemara or the Mishnah is because the whole case is where it's your backyard.
Right, so we're calling them in the sale.
So what do you mean? Well, and as well, no, but you're saying only in a place where there's the Rishut and the Nizak and the Mazik. This is your place. That's what we're talking about. So what we're excluding is only when the assailant, when the victim doesn't have a right to be there. However, sorry?
If he had a right and he killed him, is he an assailant?
The case of the Mishnah is I threw the rock in my backyard.
Right.
I'm the assailant. You now walked into my backyard. You had no permission to be there. Patur. Okay? However, says the Gemara, what do you see from the forest? They only hayav in a place where the nizak has a right to be, right? But it doesn't say mazik if you take it out. So some opinions just say it just didn't need to say it.
But that's a little bit overbroad, isn't it?
What do you mean?
I get obviously it's logical, right? If you have a right to be somewhere, you have a right to be somewhere. But a forest is, the entire public can be there.
Okay.
My backyard, the entire public can't be in my backyard.
Oh, so really that's what I was hoping to foreshadow by telling you that normally Rishut Rabim means a public domain. But then you see when we parse what the conditions are, it's not about public-private. It's about me and you, only Nizak Mazik. It doesn't bother me that other people are going to be picnicking there. Except, we'll have to see, perhaps there's a logic to say that it should make a difference. We'll see.
You spoke about a mute before about things that are forced and forced-like. Is there also a mute in that sentence that we both came in together as opposed to me coming in and you coming in unbeknownst to me?
So it does. We would not exclude that from Yar, but maybe you're saying maybe we should be Doresh, that it says, and he came with his friend. V'asher yavo et re'ehu. Prat, excluding a case where he did not come with his friend. However, the Gemara does not make that dirasha. And a dirasha is not something we could do. That's only if there's a Masoretek.
There's a big enough difference between if you and I come in together, I know you're here. If you and I don't come in together, I don't know you're here.
So you're touching on something very interesting. Because you said the words of the Mishnah, and then you added your own flavor. You made coming together about knowledge. So when we talked about Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov, the guy poked his head out, doesn't poke his head out. So an easy way of understanding that is, okay, that's about knowledge. But it doesn't say they needed to see him. Right? It doesn't say
permission.
It's about permission. It's about the launching of a rock into this space that have the potential to kill somebody, assuming that they might be there.
Foreseeability, like we said the other day.
So it's not about seeability as much as foreseeability, which is huge difference.
Yes.
Yeah? Okay, that's why I'm taking umbrage with the word knowledge or knowing. Okay, let's continue. So, sorry. So let's just finish this piece. However, what happens in the flip case? Because remember, we just parenthesized out the word velamazik. And yes, I just used that as a verb. We used the word lamazik, we took it out. What would happen in that case? What would happen if you're in your own backyard, in your own pool, sitting there reading a book, and I launch a rock in your backyard?
you launch a rock in your own backyard when you're in your pool?
What did we just say? We learned from forest that forest-like means that both people have permission to be here. Usually we're talking about permission with regards to the victim. Was the victim, did he have a right to be there? Therefore, was I allowed to throw the rock or not? How about in a case where it's so obvious I was not allowed to throw the rock because I walked into your backyard and threw it? For sure, Harezek go there, right?
100%.
Maybe not.
Because you had permission to be in my backyard?
Maybe not. Let's say I come into your backyard, okay?
With permission.
Well, let's deal with both cases.
It's the same as...
I come into your backyard, I launch it. One might say that that's not place that the Nizak and the Mazik have permission to be in. So therefore, Patur. What would the logic be for that? Come on, this should be easy.
What'd you say?
When I'm coming into your backyard, so it's permission for the Nizak, the victim, but not for the assailant.
It's permission.
That's also excluded from the forest.
It may not be mere permission to launch missiles. It might just be permission to come in.
For sure, no one is giving permission to launch
Off
missiles
limits to the
other than
assailant
Biden.
at that
Well, sorry?
It's off limit to the assailant at that point.
I'm coming into your
Off limits to the assailant. No, it's not.
Why? I have permission to come into your
I
backyard.
have permission. Let's say we're
Yeah,
talking
but you
about
have
permission.
to throw a rock and kill me.
So that's what he said. But the permission over here is not about the rock.
About the
The
end.
permission was about entry. I
it's
think
the same
it's foreseeability. It's expectation. It's not about, you never have a right to throw a rock at somebody, right? And no one has ever given you permission to throw a rock at somebody. But in a place where you're not foreseeably there, I can do whatever I want. Okay? But if you could foreseeably there, then I can't do whatever I want. Now listen to this. We're going to say an idea that maybe I come into your backyard, okay? Let's say with no permission to be there, and I'm not going to get galut. How could that be?
Because I hate you.
Sorry?
Because I hate you.
Because I hate you. Interesting. No, but maybe I don't hate you. Maybe I just walked into your backyard, I launched a
You
rock.
asked for a possibility. not
Oh, okay. What could be the possible logic for that? We've covered this 50 times. It's right in front of you. Because maybe that's too culpable for galut to be enough.
Right.
I walked into your backyard. I'm throwing rocks in your backyard. You think you're going to let me out for galut?
Not unintentional.
It's not unintentional. You see, so every time you're like, what? How could that be? Your next thought should be, obviously,
Right.
it's too culpable. Which again takes you out of that narrow window of galut. The easiest way to explain to people why we have all this, posturing and moving back and forth is that the galut window is a very narrow window.
As you said a few weeks ago, Goldilocks.
It's Goldilocks. It needs to be the perfect scenario for galut. Too little, you're not chayav. Too much, it doesn't help. Okay? So, let's continue. And by the way, and that's how the word lamazik stays in the Mishnah without being parenthesized out. So you have to tell me that the mazik has permission to be there. Okay, let's continue. Abba Shaul Omer, Abba Shaul teaches, Ma chatavat etzim reshut, af kol reshut. Just like chopping wood, a person has permission, okay? A person has permission to do, right? And it's not anything else, right? It's not obligation. Afkol reshut, also everything which is permission, which is up to you to do and not obligated. Listen to this. Yatsa ha'av hamaket beno. A father who disciplines his kid, slaps him across the face because the kid ran in the street. Little did he know, he triggered some crazy weird side effect. The kid is suffering from slapitis and the kid passes away. Ve'harav orodeh talmido. Or a teacher that slaps his student because he did something outrageously chutzpahdik, right? Ushliach bedin, and also the shaliach bedin who's giving somebody lashes. They miscalculated for whatever reason. When there's an inadvertent act of killing, which was obligated to be done, not up to you whether you decide to do it or not. So in such a case, there would not be galut. Let's be clear one more time. Abba Shaul is doing what we just did about forest and forest-like. We now went to chopping and chopping-like. Chopping wood, no one commands you to do. Okay? But if you were commanded to do it, if there was an obligation to do it, you would do it, you were fulfilling your job in doing it, but something happened, something went wrong, That is not continue. That's not considered the case of the Mishnah of inadvertent murder, which results in galut. Let me add one interesting thing. In our first Masechet that we learned, Masechet Ta'anit, we learned that there was a certain day in the calendar year which was a day of joy. And why was it a day of joy? Because that was the day when they used to chop the wood for the ma'aracha. So I don't know why the Mishnah, in seeking a case which you were obligated to do, did not give us an actual wood chopping obligatory case, which was literally what the pasuk is saying. Why do we go to a father, to a rabbi, to a shaliach bedin? Why do we go there? By the way, I was just thinking, there's many other examples of this. One might figure out. Let's say a person's father told him, go chop wood. I'm freezing. There would be an obligation to chop that wood of kibud avayim. Many examples like this, right? So, but whatever the case is, the Mishnah gave us an exception that when the act itself is not just done out of my own free will because I wanted to do it, then there's no halakha of galut. Let's start with the Gemara. L'reshut harabim.
Does that part get clearer?
All of this,
Okay,
yeah.
'cause that one's not so clear.
Which part?
About that just as wood chopping is voluntary, if someone kills someone by accident voluntary, that's what it's saying?
So before we move on, let's just make that clear, at least on its surface level.
Please.
The act itself needs to be an act that I'm choosing to do and I'm not obligated to do. So that's as simple as it can be. So the Torah picked an activity which is arbitrarily up to you. You want to chop wood, chop wood. You don't want to chop wood, go buy Duraflame logs at 7-Eleven. Whatever you would like to do is fine, no problem, fadal, okay? But there's no obligation. The Mishnah is seizing on the fact that it told you what the activity was. In each case, the pasuk could have said it without telling me. Why else? You know that famous joke, right? Guy hangs up a sign in the Jewish street. It says, fresh fish sold here. You know that joke? Anyway, of course, Jews love to give advice and opinions. They see this kid opens up the store. Some kid comes, he says, listen, I don't know what you put up the sign. Fresh fish sold here. Does anyone in the world sell spoiled fish? Old fish? Of course, fresh. Selling fish is going to be fresh. What are you putting the word fresh up there? It doesn't make sense. The kid says, you're right, 100%. He takes the paint roller, Okay, fish sold here. Another Jewish guy walks by 5 minutes later. He goes, what are you giving it away? Obviously, he has to say so. What are you going to tell him? That's so. The guy said, you're right, 100%. No one gives fish away on the high street. He sells it, fish here. Anyway, another guy walks by. He says, I don't understand. He goes, you think I can't smell your fish down the block? You need to tell me that fish are here? Everyone in the whole block is complaining. You don't need to put the word fish. Everyone can follow their nose. Had that erases it. Also, this is left to sign here. Some guy goes, where else? Right? So you have a pasuk. The pasuk tells you, a guy goes into the forest and he's chopping wood and he's swinging an axe. What else is the guy swinging an axe in a forest for? What else is the guy swinging an axe in general for? We know it's a forest. We know it's for chopping wood. The Torah must have been trying to give me a mi'ut, either a exclusion or an inclusion with these words. So we took the forest word, and what did we do? We said forest is a place where everyone's allowed to be. And what are we saying? Culpability, foreseeability. It has to be that if there shouldn't have been anybody there, you're not even galut, because why would you think that there's a problem? You didn't do something that is dangerous. The second idea, by the way, I have done this myself. I don't know, have you ever been over, on a mountain, a big ravine? Take a bunch of teenage boys to a mountaintop over a big ravine. 1,000%, what are they doing? Chucking rocks as far as they can to see who can throw it the furthest. Meanwhile, up down there in the people having picnic area, they don't understand what in the world's going on. Right? They're getting barad. Meanwhile, has v'shalom, someone died. This is the case. You be hayav.
I don't think the juxtaposed examples are good examples.
What do you mean? The av?
Meaning the av hitting the sun. No one really knows that it's something that you should do.
Today, in our society, all we have to go back is one generation, and they all understood. My father told me that in Halab, when they came to the kitab and they walked in the door, the teacher said, hold out your fingers. He hit them on the hands. They just walked in. My father said, listen, if I did something wrong, you want to hit me, fine, right? But you're going to hit me now, I just came. He goes, this is so you shouldn't do something. This is what it was. I'm young enough to remember getting hit many times in school, So this was something that was part of the disciplinary process. And by the way, at that time, when you got a slap from your father, from your rabbi, you weren't scarred for life and you didn't need therapy. And you actually learned your lesson some of the time. Okay,
but
let's move on.
An obligation versus an expectation.
It is an obligation for a person to discipline their child. Shlomo HaMelech says, Chosech shifto soneh beno. Withhold the rod, spare the rod, spoil the child.
So
now,
this
back
generation is not.
no. So why don't we do it now? There's a famous halakha in the Shulchan Aruch. Shulchan Aruch says that if a person has a child that's already a teenager, he's not allowed to hit him. Not allowed. Asur. Why? He says, because if your kid hits you back, Makkot aviv vamet, right? Makkot aviv, you hit your father, it's chiyuv mitah on hitting your father. You hit your kid, the kid hits you back, now you caused him to have this terrible. So when you have a kid that's that rebellious, that if you hit him, you know he's going to hit you back, it's asur to hit him. And if you're not sure, safek deoraita lechumra, put your hands away. You know what I mean? So as time went on, that age dropped and dropped and dropped and dropped. And the result of what would happen from a smack in today's world is actually counterproductive, in which case it would be forbidden for someone to do that. Okay? But back then, that was not the case.
The Shaliach Beit Dino is obligated to carry out the lashes on the guy.
Correct.
So that's not.
No, that's the case of.
Different than
No, all of these are obligated.
Because if the person,
Oh, the father is obligated to hit.
Oh yeah,
the
all
Oh,
three
okay.
cases. I love that you guys both understand the Gemara. The Mishnah's case is like, obviously that's not the Hayuv. That's the other case, But we don't live in it. We don't live with it. But it's amazing. It's only one generation ago.
may I
Yeah.
make a comment
Yes.
while you're here?
Fish here.
Your example, the person who's getting the lashes, if he were to hit back against the lash giver, he's not creating. There's no chayuv mitah because he's not hitting his father. His father's not the court appointed marshal.
Right, I was saying the court appointed marshal though has an obligation to hit that
Correct.
person. That's not.
And that's why we're using that case. That's what the Mishnah is saying. In cases of obligation, that doesn't match the case of the Pasuk, which was giving a case of non-obligatory act.
chopping wood.
Chopping wood, exactly.
Okay, I got it.
Okay? Good.
That's why I raised the issue.
Okay, now
Huh?
it's clear now. Before it wasn't clear.
If the kid's under bar mitzvah, then there would not be this isur. There's a different question of whether or not you should hit your children. I don't. The times that I hit my children are, only ever for two things. I was taught by my rabbis. We don't hit anymore. For almost nothing. You hit a child when a child puts themselves in danger, when runs across the street, because at that point the lesson, it's so important that the lesson gets driven into the kid's psyche, because it could be life or death for him. You can't have a conversation about how it's a good idea to look both ways before you cross the street. That's when you slap a child. That's one example that they say. And the other one was for blatant or brazen chutzpah. That was the other one. But I'll tell you one thing. I learned from a rabbi in Israel. He said to me, it used to be when you discuss, different generations, it used to be you were talking about a generation was 20 years ago, 40 years ago, the new generation. The experts in chinuch are saying that today the span of a generation is between 3 and 5 years.
That's insane.
3 years ago, the world is a different place. It's nuts, right?
6 months.
You think it's a crazy thing, but so your example is of a random occurrence. What they're talking about is the consistent. So even Has v'Shalom, October 7th changed the world, but that's not something which is as part of the acceleration post-industrial, post-technological revolution. The world has changed in the last 100 years, 100 times more, 1,000, million times more than it's changed over the span of the 5,000 years before it.
It's accelerating.
So there's always an accelerate. And whenever you have these industrial technological revolutions, the rate of acceleration it's an exponential rise of change. So again, this law, this teaching that they gave us, when I was raising my kids only 15 years, 20 years ago, whatever it was, when we first started having children, 22 years ago, is already, I think we're already living in a different world. I remember the first time that a student called the police on a teacher because the teacher gave him a slap. I remember when it happened in school when I was a child. So that was like the watershed moment. You know, that in a Jewish religious school, this was also, that was not going to happen anymore. Okay, let's start with the Gemara. The Gemara says as follows: Reshut Rabim. What does it mean, Reshut Rabim? You throw a stone into a crowded marketplace. That's our friendly chainsaw dancer at a wedding. Mezidu. That's not ones. So exactly what Morris pointed out right in the beginning. If Reshut, does this mean if Reshut Rabim? That's not an accident. You throw a stone into Madison Avenue. Of course you're gonna hit somebody. You'd be lucky if it doesn't hit someone. Okay. So mezidu, that can't be what the Mishnah is telling you. Amar Shmuel Yitzchak says, "Besoter et kotelo." It's talking about a scenario where someone is knocking down his wall, his outside wall, and as he's knocking down his outside wall, one of the stones falls off in Reshut Rabim. The Gemara says, "Ibailehu leyune." 1 second, you're knocking down a wall in front of a street. Look out the window, see if someone's about to get flattened by the debris from your home. So that means that it can't be that that's unintentional. That would have to be considered intentional as well. Even if I wasn't wantonly throwing, a stone, and I was engaged in a normal process of knocking down a wall, which is a constructive thing, etc., or destructive, depending on if you're planning on rebuilding it on Shabbat.
So it's foreseeable.
It's foreseeable, exactly. The Gemara says no. It's talking about where the guy knocks down the wall at the nighttime. The nighttime people are not out. Now, just to be clear, this Gemara, I would not imagine is relevant in our times.
Because we have lights.
We have lights, we have electricity. The idea that in time of Chanukah, you had 30 minutes to light the candles. Because after those 30 minutes, nobody on the street. Who's going to be on the street? Middle of the night, still wasn't a thing. Now that you go to Times Square in the middle of the night, it's Laila Kayom Yair, right? I can't imagine that there would be any sort of, it's not like a time-based mitzvah that in the morning you get galut and in the nighttime you're patur. So therefore, in a scenario of no ibayele le'yune, by the way, I would imagine that this law might actually still apply in Deal, New Jersey, in the middle of the winter at night.
Right.
Yeah, there's nothing there, nothing happening. Okay, let's continue. Says the Gemara. But look at that. Who would have thought that we would have political commentary in the middle of the Gemara Makkot? Gemara continues. But Laila Nami Ibayele Yune. Says the Gemara, what do you mean? Nighttime also, you have to check. Even if it's nighttime. Still, the Gemara says, no. So we want to give a clear case. And this is interesting. Because what could the Gemara have said to this? What do you mean? You should have looked at night. What could the Gemara have said? Don't do it at night. No, in other words, what could we say that would allow us to keep the case of Soter Kotelo Balayla? The Gemara's answer could have been, it was late enough at night that nobody's out. So the Gemara could have just made it a later hour. But the Gemara doesn't want to give what's called Natata Devarecha the Shiurin, which means you gave your words and now you can fiddle with them. How late is late? What time? What city? So what do? We're going to change the case to try and have something that the case itself is already the differentiator. Gemara says no. When I'm knocking down the wall and the wall is getting knocked into the garbage. Okay, so in such a case, there's nobody in the garbage. I don't have to worry, whether exactly what time it is. Now, just to be clear, would this halakha only be true in the nighttime? No. We're now going back and we're creating a new case. We're creating a case where daytime or nighttime, it would be not, what's it called?
No scout.
It would be there wouldn't be reason you should have looked. But now we have the opposite problem.
India.
We have the Goldilocks problem. If it's a Reshut Rabim, I should have looked, I'm mezid. If I shouldn't have looked, why am I even galut? I should have thought someone was in the garbage.
But shouldn't the logical progression been, like you started to get into before? If it's between 8 and 10, X. If it's between 10 and 12, Y, etc., etc. Because people are not out all hours of the night.
Correct.
In this time frame.
Yes.
Why didn't they do that?
I think the reason why the Gemara didn't do that is because that would also depend on the city. There would be differentiating
They
factors.
could have said that.
I know, but it's just too many. There's too many follow-up questions. In other words, you go to a city like Deal, the time starts earlier. So what about Deal in this place? How about Lock Harbor? What about, and then we're going to start asking every place. You have a place which is more of a metropolis. Well, Brooklyn. It's not Manhattan. Okay, in Manhattan, is 72nd the same as 42nd? So you just start going road by road in every street in the world. So the Gemara is trying to find something ironclad, okay? Now, what the Gemara could have done, if you wanted to pull Lamar's mystery, is the Gemara could have not given us a time and could have given us a category. On Chanukah, when do you light our Chanukah candles? In the time when people are in the shuk, in the street. We could have said that. And then you go figure it out. In your city, you figure out when are the people out. Could have said that, okay? So the Gemara, instead of doing that, actually went with a space continuum instead of a time continuum. But now we're left with the exact opposite question, aren't we? The Gemara asks, "Hi ashpa hechidami." What's this? What is this garbage that you're talking about? Ishchichi barabim. I don't understand. If people ever go into that garbage because they go to the bathroom in the garbage dump, or they do whatever they do, or they look for Bitcoin, posheahu, then the guy is poshea because people use the garbage. But ilo, and if lo shchichi barabim, people don't use the garbage, they don't go there. Anusu. The guy's done nothing. How many times have you gone to a garbage? I don't know if you even have it anymore. But when I first got married, there's big green dump there. Where do you take your garbage bag? You hoist it. Tell me the amount of times you looked in the garbage bin to see if someone was there. 0 times, right? So it's honest. What do you want from the guy, right? Gemara says, so your ashpa case doesn't make sense because it's not Goldilocks. Either if it's a place that people go, it's mezid. If it's not a place that people go, then it's honest. It's not shogeg. Amar Rav Papa. Rav Papa says, Rav Papa, by the way, is tearing it up. Have you noticed over the last 5 pages? Amar Rav Papa. Rav Papa says, Lo tzricha ela ashpa asui lipanot babalayla. We're talking about is a case where there's a garbage area or room or dumpster or whatever, that it's not used normally. People don't use it during the daytime because everyone can see. But at nighttime that nobody could see and they want to go and they need to go to the bathroom, people will use that space. V'ika de mikri v'yativ. Sometimes you'd have some people who sit, as they're walking by, they sit down in that spot. So poshea lo havi. I'm not a poshea d'ha'en asui lipanot babayom. Because people are not always there during the daytime. Honest nami lo havi, I'm not honest because some people, they do sit there and they do by occasionally or by coincidence they wind up sitting there. So it's the kind of place which is a maybe yes, maybe no. You can't tell me it's intentional murder because I don't have to expect. I'm using the words carefully. I don't have to expect people are there, but I also can't assume that nobody's there.
Because of the word maybe?
Sorry?
Because of they may use it at night?
Both of the mays create this quasi-usage status, which makes me think to myself, you know what? I'm going to throw it. There's probably nobody there. If that's what I'm saying, that's shogeg. If I'm throwing it and thinking to myself, there's for sure nobody there, then I'm not a shogeg.
But the act of throwing it without some purpose is...
See, you're saying something very interesting now. You're saying that, why are you randomly throwing a
You're
rock?
not fixing a wall.
No,
Yeah.
they're using
Deconstructing
rock
the wall.
as
Yeah.
wall.
Sorry?
You're not deconstructing the wall, which has a purpose to it, right?
Right. So if I'm not deconstructing a wall, I'm just chucking a rock.
Zorik is different than the wall?
So he's asking, shouldn't it be?
I would agree. Throwing a rock and knocking down a wall is two different things.
Oh, so here's where it gets interesting, actually. When you start paying attention to why the guy did the act, you're really missing the point. Let me explain. Our kavanah in why I did an act that could be construed as unintentional murder, we don't care what your purpose is in doing it. Our point here is not saying you were doing this just to be dangerous. We're not trying to assign malicious culpability. We're just trying to say you should have known or you shouldn't have known. So it doesn't matter what I was doing when I shouldn't have known or I should have known. All that matters is, right, whether I shouldn't have done it, or I was obligated to check. Otherwise, it's a pishia. That's the way we're looking at it. So to think about whether you had a good reason or not is not here. That's not here. But you should ask me, then why does the Mishnah care about whether you were obligated to do the action or not obligated to do the action? If I don't care what your intentions are, so how could you tell me that you're exempting a person who's obligated? Did he or did he not do an act that was dangerous?
And the law is different, by the way.
Go ahead.
But the
halakha, the law than this.
Yeah.
Well, let me be clear. The law, the halakha is also different than the halakha.
Okay.
These halachot are not about responsible, not responsible. They're about responsible vis-a-vis the galut punishment.
Right.
We will see that there are other punishments.
We get lost in that.
A lot of times we get lost in that. Every time I give you a scenario where the guy it's more chamur than the case before, and we're like, no galut. Every time, without fail, someone's like, what? He should for sure get galut.
Right.
And we always have to revisit that same thing, because we're only dealing here with one outcome, the outcome of galut, which is, again, it's highly unusual and highly irregular in the jurisprudence of the Torah. Okay? Let's continue. So the Gemara says, in such a case where we've fashioned maybe someone's there, maybe someone's not there, that's the case of Reshut Harabim, where the person did this action in a public place. Okay?
Can throwing a stone be seen in any other way other than malicious?
Yeah, I'm throwing a stone in my backyard. I don't even know that anyone's there. Doing it for fun.
Public domain throwing a stone.
Yeah, but my backyard, remember, public domain, we've already said, it's not about Reshut Harabim. It's whether or not that person's supposed to be there or not. Okay? So I'm in my backyard throwing a rock. Or I'm camping. And how many times have you skipped stones on the So usually you fail miserably. I always realize there's this amazing scientific interconnectivity between how many skips you get and how many people are watching. I feel like Hashem and the angels reversely correlated. There is inversely. There's this. I feel like Hashem and the angels also every once in a while need to have a good time. So I feel like these are like the moments where Hashem and the angels laugh and have popcorn. Like, they give the guy who can't do it, he's out there, and then finally everyone turns around and he does like 100 across the lake. And he's like, I did. Everyone's like, okay, sure. And in Shamayim, they're cracking up. Okay, let's continue. Rabbi Elazar ben Eliezer, we have only 3 more minutes. Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov says, so remember, this whole idea about the wall that we just did was in the Tanakama, in the beginning of the Mishnah. The beginning of the Mishnah says, you throw something into Reshut Harabim, that's galut. The Mishnah's question was, how is that Goldilocks? Either you're too guilty, or you're not guilty enough. Answers the Gemara, in the maybe case, that's the perfect scenario of galut. Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov says, remember what Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov's case was. I throw the rock, and then the guy sticks his head out the window. Okay? Says the Gemara, where's Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov coming from? Tanu Rabbanan, we learned umatzah, right? Remember the pasuk. The pasuk says umatzah, and the axe, whether it's the axe head or the piece of wood, umatzah et re'ehu, that flying projectile finds the person. Umatzah et re'ehu, it finds a person. Umatzah, it needs to be that thing finds the person. Prat, that comes to exclude limamtzi et atzmo. He found it. Its trajectory was already concluded, right? From the moment he threw it, the trajectory is already clear. Okay, so it was going this way. It didn't hit you. You hit it.
You interrupted it.
So you found it in its pathway. It didn't find you. Okay, so therefore that would not be umatzah. That would be prat. The exclusion is lemamtzi et atzmo, a person who makes himself find it. Mikan Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov learned over here in Mishiatzah miado, if when from the moment the stone left his hand, after that moment, the guy sticks his head out. patur, you would be patur. What?
He finding it.
He finding it is patur from galut.
After left the hand.
After it left the hand. Yes. Okay. Now, by the way, we'll have to already see what's going on. What happens if this scenario is a case of a true Rishut Rabim? So there's a bunch of people here.
I
Okay.
disagree with this.
What do you mean?
I don't think it's right.
You were putting fault.
Go
I
ahead.
doesn't. The guy's not sticking his head out because he's thinking a stone is going to come. He doesn't have to think that.
Checking the weather.
He's not obligated to watch for someone, a jerk, throwing a stone when he shouldn't be throwing a stone.
You're doing it again.
Logic.
What's that?
One second. What are you doing? What are you doing? Again, you're asking, how do we make this guy an act of murder, or vice versa with regards to the man coming
I'm
out?
saying patur. I say Rabbi Eliezer is saying the guy's patur.
Yes,
I say he's negligent. He's not patur.
negligent, not patur.
Yeah,
One more-
that's what I'm disagreeing with.
One more
That's why
time.
He should be killed.
One more time. Absolutely, except that we're talking about galut. So in other words, it might be that he's chayav in other responsibilities, but in terms of galut, it has to be the correct amount of negligibility. So it has to be that you're there when I throw it, because then this and this were both in place when I did it. If I threw it and no one was there, then you came in afterwards. Now you had permission to be there. You could have come in there, but you weren't there.
But there could have been 10 people.
Can I even give you a better example? What if I looked
And you weren't there.
and there was nobody there? And let's make it better, because I know that you're getting caught on the responsibility of it. Let's say the guy didn't throw a rock like a dib. He looked down, he's doing construction, he takes a sack of the things and he throws it out the window. Because he just needs to get it down to the bottom. But he made sure, he checked 50 times. He's like, timber! He chucks it down. Then the guy sticks his head out the window.
He's responsible. We learned that before.
What do you mean?
You're going down the thing, you gotta,
No,
going up.
but soter
Not galut.
soter into Rishut Rabim is chayav, right?
Right.
Is hareze goleh. But if the guy's head wasn't there, he's not chayav, according to Rabbi Ben Yaakov. Now we don't know. You just picked up on is what I started with. We don't know if Rabbi Eliezer is arguing on the Tanakama or the Tanakama agrees. And he's just limiting the Tanakama. But what you just picked up on is the two possibilities of that. Either we say, no, that is the case of soter. You didn't know if the guy was there or not. You knocked it at the thing. It was a maybe. Hayav. Rabbi Ben Yaakov comes and says, no, if the guy wasn't there, then there's no culpability because he wasn't there. Well, is he arguing? Or is the Tanakama now going to be mitigating or limiting his case of Hareze Goleh? So we're going to see. Okay, beautiful. Hazaku Baruch.